Hello everyone, I'm super excited to be here. A quick introduction about myself. My name is Behbahani. I'm a research student at City University of London. My research is in partnership with Kuwait College of Science and Technology. So my first supervisor is Professor Raj and my second supervisor is Professor Khalid. I'm also a senior manager, assistant head of information security, privacy and anti-fraud at Kuwait International Bank. The objective of my research is to explore the numerous approaches to cybersecurity threat management and apply machine learning technique that enables a pragmatic approach towards an effective measurement of cybersecurity threats. There are two objectives of this presentation. A, to highlight the current trends in cyber risk management. B, present a brief overview of currently work in progress research paper in collaboration with KCST. A quick introduction. As we all know, cybersecurity threat landscape is changing rapidly as new cybersecurity threats are emerging. Organizations must invest heavily in the procurement of effective cybersecurity controls to protect its information assets, as failure to do so can lead to reputational damage. Therefore, risk management can provide organizations with a framework that can enable an effective identification of threats and vulnerabilities towards a optimized expenditure prioritization. As the last thing we want is a random spending, especially that cybersecurity is an OpEx. ISO 31000 states that a risk is effective uncertainty on objectives, and risk management is about coordination and control of risk. So a question here, is risk always a negative matter? The answer would be no, as in project management, there are positive and negative effects on a project's objective. Say, for example, a project that completes early is a positive risk. When we look at risk types, there are numerous risk types available. So we've got strategic risk, we've got market risk, we've got credit risk, we've got operational risk, and compliance risk and IT risk. So let's take some examples. So credit risk is about the risk of lending money to individuals and corporate not getting it back. Operational risk is about, for example, risk of failed internal process that could lead to operational issues. As for IT, this is basically the cybersecurity risk and our focus for today. Now, when we talk about risk methodologies, there are two types of risk methodologies. We've got a quantitative versus qualitative. Quantitative risk assessment focuses on the numbers, whilst a qualitative risk assessment is less about numbers and more about what would actually happen. We began our research by conducting a systematic literature review on quantitative risk assessment. We adopted the preferred reporting items for systematics review and meta-analysis, also known as PRISMA. So PRISMA has 27-item checklist and 4-phase flow diagram. We started with 466 papers, and after careful screening, we ended up with 82 papers from reputable journals. As we explored the papers, it was clear that dynamic risk assessment was the most trending approach. Adapting to new information, handling data scarcity, and data uncertainties were the major limitations with quantitative risk assessment approach. Therefore, dynamic risk assessment was the key solution to the problem. One could also say that dynamic risk assessment is a method that basically assesses risk by continuously updating probabilities of event as new information becomes available. Once we concluded the review, it was evident that dynamic risk assessment should be dynamic, it should be probabilistic, it should be real-time, economically math, computationally fast. When we say dynamic, it basically means it should adapt to changing environment. Probabilistic means predicting known and unknown threats. Real-time indicates that the framework is updated when information is required, and reduced time in decision-making means computationally fast. We've noted an increase in research back in 2013, and we're expecting even more by end of 2021. Machine learning was the most used approach by 67%, and 39% out of those 67% utilized Bayesian network approach and risk assessment. We've also noted that the general IT and industrial control systems were the most industries dynamic risk assessment was applied. 64% of the papers claimed that they can predict unknown attacks. And MATLAB was the most common software used to develop algorithms. The literature review inspired us to develop our own framework. We decided to call it CITRA, Cloud Enterprise Dynamic Risk Assessment. Its objective is to enable a dynamic risk assessment of a cloud setup for financial organizations. Our key problem statement that despite the availability of techniques for identifying and measuring cloud services, however, they lack the ability to basically assess vulnerabilities collectively, assessing the domino effects of the attack, mapping monetary losses for better decision making. The framework consists of bow-tie analysis and dynamic Bayesian network. The framework consists, as I mentioned, of both of these. So let's explore together the bow-tie analysis. The reason why it is called a bow-tie, well, because it looks like a bow-tie. The threats are outlined on the left-hand side with their control measures, known also as the safety barriers, and the consequences on the right-hand side with the recovery measures. Here's an exemplary realization of a bow-tie analysis for a man in smoke. So the man in smoke is the hazardous event. So you've got on the left-hand side, we have the top threats with their control measures, and on the right-hand side, we've got the top consequences along with the recovery measures. For example, if we look at sleep as the top threat, has alarm, evacuation, searching premise as control measures. And on the other hand side, we have intoxication with tactic ventilation, escape mask usage, and ladder as recovery measures. The bow-tie helps us to visualize the threats and consequences easily. And basically, that's the beauty of it. Because bow-tie is static by nature, we mentioned earlier that the ultimate model should be dynamic. We've introduced Bayesian network to our framework. Bayesian networks are a type of probabilistic graphical model. They are ideal for tasks such as prediction, anomaly detection, diagnostic, and reasoning. The dynamic Bayesian network is mainly an extension of a standard Bayesian network with concept of time. Well, Bayesian network is also a graphically presented model, as we can see here. Given our objective is to achieve dynamic behavior over time, bow-tie model must be converted into dynamic Bayesian network. So the x1 to x4 represent the variables which are the top of the events of the bow-tie, and the arcs presents the causal relationship. So our framework basically looks like this. We've got the vulnerabilities are fed into the model. Our bow-tie model is constructed based on the top events and the safety barriers. Then we map the bow-tie to the Bayesian network. Then we introduce the monetary terms to achieve quantified cyber risk that management can basically comprehend. We developed a Python program to train the model using the vulnerability dataset we have created based on the Capital One incident. So Capital One incident was one of the first banks in the world to invest in migrating their on-premises data center to a cloud computing environment, which played a key role in the data leakage incident back in 2019. Basically, Capital One said they have leaked, the adversaries have leaked sensitive customer information by an external individual. To basically wrap this up, I would like to conclude with 4 points. The trend is towards a dynamic risk assessment. There is a potential gap in cloud risk assessment. We'll witness an increase in adoption of machine learning utilization. Bow-tie analysis and dynamic Bayesian network model are fit for dynamic risk assessment. And I hope you have all enjoyed this presentation. Thank you for listening.